two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Yes, hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast with James and Mark. Very good to see you, hear you, be with you, communicate to you, whatever it is you say, on this Friday. If you're listening on launch day, it's a beautiful sunny week in the United Kingdom. We don't get to say that very often, Mark. We travel around the world, don't we, for various things, and I love travelling, I love the world, but when the sun shines in Britain, it's one of the best places to be.
Well, yeah, I couldn't disagree with you there, and I've been obviously in Salisbury, and it's beautiful here as well. So I've had a little walk at lunchtime just to clear my head because we've been so busy the last couple of weeks. So much going on. It's quite nice just to get things slowly calming down, getting back to normal again.
Yeah, so we've had the 101 course open, which has been an absolute blast. It's been fantastic bringing on board so many people again. One of my jobs has been to talk to, I think you put a request out, say, first thoughts anyone, and got 80 or 90 responses, and I've been interviewing quite a few of those people. And what's really great is people who are brand new to it, they're very excited and they see the possibilities. What's really good, I think, and interesting for us is the people who've been doing it for a couple of years, and you can see this weight's lifted off their shoulder, that somebody who's going to hold their hand through this process they hadn't quite got to grips with. And they've kind of heard bits and pieces of almost everything in the course, but never been given the instructions. Everything on the internet usually stops short of the detail of how to do things, and so that's been really, really pleasing.
Yeah, it's not just the detail. It's also, as you say, it's kind of linking things together. So, knowing how to do a task and then what task to do next and then what to do after that. That's one of the things that I was most keen to get into the course, and it's really flattering and pleasing to see that that's what students feel that they've got. So, it's been very busy, but we've had a lot of fun onboarding, hundreds of new students into the Genius group, and just seeing them starting to get to grips with the material and interacting with one another. It's just been, as we expected, it would be just really good fun.
Yeah, it has been. And that's it for 101 now. That shuts up shop until 2018. Some point in the spring, we imagine, we'll open up the doors and onboard some people again. And we had quite a few emails because we were open for 101, people asking about the advertising course. Well, that won't be open until the autumn 2017. So later this year, we'll give you more gen as we get closer to that. So a few other things to say before our author interview. We've got a great author interview today, which I'm very excited about. One thing is to say that we're very aware that not everyone buys a course, and we do want to do as much as we can, particularly for people at the beginning of their careers getting into self-publishing. And I mentioned last week that we're going to put together a course. Mark's going to put together another course which will be free. It'll be a mini course, maybe 3 sessions, and we're looking for your ideas of what that should be on. So this would be geared around authors who've got through the writing process but don't know really where to start in transforming themselves into a properly self-published author with an accent on the publishing side of things. So it might be launch strategy, it might be mailing lists, it might be cover design, whatever you think's important to you that you'd like to have some instructional detail for free about. We're all ears for that, as we've already had a couple of emails in and some very good suggestions. But if you can drop us an email, support at selfpublishingformula.com, and just put podcast idea or something into the subject so that we can differentiate the emails. And then we'll get on with that. One of the many jobs we've got over the summer, you and I.
God, yeah. No, the work doesn't stop. There's some quite exciting new announcements to make. As I think Stuart has hinted in the group, Stuart Bache, my cover designer, we've got something coming up on cover design that's going to be quite exciting. There's also something else that we can't announce yet that is going to be very, very exciting and will really fill a hole in the market that we think that we see. So looking forward to that. And then also we've got I'm trying to think how many, at least 3 free guidebooks coming out. We've got 2 books on editing, and I've read both of them, and they're both great. 5 editing maxims that will help you improve your writing, and then another book on how to work with an editor, so copy editing, proofreading, all of that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, we've also got quite a detailed little book on Facebook advertising, using Facebook lead gen ads to build up your mailing list. So we've taken the video course that we do and we turn that into a free book. So some people will learn better from a book than they do from a video. So we're in the process of putting that together right now as well. So I'd say within the next month or so, we'll have 4 books that people can get, and they'll all be free. We won't charge for those books, but we want them to have tons and tons of value inside them. So that's what we're trying to do at the moment.
Yeah, and the one book that we started with, which is available and going down very well, is The Vault, which is the backlog of all the podcast interviews. A lot of value in there as well, indexed and searchable, and you can get that by visiting selfpublishingformula.com/vault. I think that's it. I mean, we should mention in the summer, what are we doing? You're going to RWA, the Romance Writers Association of America.
Romance Writers of America.
Romance Writers of America.
I'll be in Orlando for that. At the same time, coincidentally, you're with your family on holiday in Orlando. So.
But I'm going to be on a roller coaster going woo like this, and you're going to be.
I'm going to be on a roller coaster as well, but it'll be entirely different ones.
Yeah.
The other thing, I'm going to be speaking at I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it's the International Women's Writers Conference or something along those lines. I'm sure I've butchered that, but that's in Matera in southern Italy in September. So looking forward to that one as well. So yeah, loads going on. And then in the meantime, we're also having a really extensive redesign of our, quite frankly, crappy website at the moment. So we're really looking forward to getting that out. But another big job for us. But we've got our third amigo, the ever trusty John Dyer, is manfully taking that task on. So I'm looking forward to getting that ready for everyone to look at hopefully in a month or so. Yeah,
I think we'll all breathe a sigh of relief when that website gets replaced and updated.
Especially John.
Yeah. Good. Okay, let's move on to the meat of today's podcast. I promised you an exciting and interesting author interview. If you're watching on YouTube, I can show you the book. This is the debut novel from a man called Steve Cavanagh, who lives in Northern Ireland. And he has had an interesting life. He's a lawyer himself, human rights lawyer in the province. This book is gripping, and I'm very delighted actually to have a signed copy which arrived this morning. It's called The Defence. I love the sort of tags on the front: lawyer, husband, father, above the title, con artist, hustler, criminal below. And to set the story up, it's basically about a roguish former con artist turned lawyer who got a bit complacent in his life and is finding himself in court with his daughter kidnapped by the Russian mafia, expecting to carry out their will as for him as a lawyer in court. So a brilliant start. That's not a spoiler, that's in the sleeve notes. And Steve is a really fascinating, interesting guy to talk to. So we're going to have a chat with him, and then Mark and I'll be back afterwards.
Well, I'm Steve Cavanagh. I'm a lawyer from Northern Ireland, and I also write legal thrillers. The legal thrillers are set in New York, and they feature a series character called Eddie Flynn. And probably unusually for this show, I'm traditionally published. Because I know you have a lot, this is the self-publishing formula. So, and I think Cal Moriarty was talking to Mark and suggested they might want to talk to me. So this is how I come to be here.
Yeah, we have nothing against traditional publishing, and you're very welcome on here. We have quite a few guests who are on both sides. So although we are very much focused on kind of value for self-publishers and some of the hows and ways and means, but we can get onto some of that stuff anyway. And with you, so a lawyer who writes thrillers. I know another lawyer who writes thrillers.
Yes, Mr. Dawson.
Yeah. What is it about these lawyers? I guess you're all learned people, so you have to write. I mean, there's a lot going on in your brains.
Well, I don't know. I don't think I'm particularly learned at all. I think most lawyers are good storytellers. Most good lawyers are storytellers, because that's what you're doing in court. You're telling a story. I'm telling my client's story. And you need to have those skills to be able to use evidence and testimony to tell a convincing, credible story. And whoever tells the best story wins. So I certainly, taken storytelling skills from the law and use them here. And I'm sure Mark's the same. But yeah, there seem to be far too many lawyers who are writers. It's just, it should be stopped, really. There should be some sort of a law against it.
But that is an interesting take on it. because I guess that's exactly what you are doing, particularly with the jury. Although, remind me, in Belfast, because I think you didn't used to have juries in Belfast. Do you have them now?
Yeah, we still have juries for criminal trials. If it's a terrorist trial, though, we would have a diplock court, so a judge would sit alone without a jury, so that the jury are not intimidated. But for most cases, we have juries on the criminal side of things, and occasionally in civil side for defamation cases, a High Court judge would sit with a jury.
Because one would like to think that you could coldly present the facts, A, B, C, D, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the jury would deliberate carefully, make a decision, but you're ignoring the human factor then, aren't you, about the narrative and the emotion?
Well, exactly. And this is one of the things that my series explores. My main character is a guy called Eddie Flynn, who used to be a con artist. And then he discovered that a lot of the skills that go with hustling are also skills that a lawyer uses. And he became a trial lawyer. So they all have those skills. It's distraction, misdirection, manipulation. All of that. I'm quite a big student of advocacy. I do a lot of my own court work, so I've studied this and how the greats do it, and there's a huge crossover in that. So this is a character who uses those skills in a courtroom. So because legal thrillers, the law is great, but it's not good for a thriller. No one gets excited about legal procedurals. It's the action and the emotional and the psychology that's going on in the courtroom. And that's what keeps people returning back to these books.
Dare I say it starts off as a reasonably cynical view of advocacy and lawyers.
Absolutely. Well, it's realistic. I mean, that's what happens. Eddie's sort of partly inspired by a lawyer called Clarence Darrow, who's a very, very famous, any of your American listeners will immediately know that name. He's a very, very famous civil rights lawyer. And Darrow, he did a lot of famous trials. He did the Stopes trial and quite a number of death penalty cases, but he started out as a civil lawyer, a labour union lawyer, until he was caught allegedly bribing a jury, and then moved into criminal law. He was tried for jury tampering and beat the charge. There was another charge levied against him, which he managed to get settled on the basis that he wouldn't practice law in California. But he then went on between 1910 and about 1923 to do over 100 capital murder cases. He lost one case out of all of that. Now, you don't do that by being simply a great advocate, and he was a great advocate, and no one will take that away from him. But he also used other methods. One of the stories about Darrow is that he won a lot of his cases using a hat pin and a cigar. Do you know this story?
Go ahead, no.
So, what Darrow would do is you would wait until it would be the main prosecution witness, the prosecution star witness is going to give evidence. And before court that morning, Darrow used to smoke these sort of foot-long, big Cuban cigars. And he would get a lady's hat pin, and he would thread it through the centre of the cigar. He would then be in court in the days when you could smoke without a SWAT team descending on you in a public building. He would light up the cigar and smoke away while the prosecution witness gave her evidence. But the thing is, he didn't tip the ash from the cigar into the ashtray. And that day he also wore a beautiful pressed white linen suit. So as the testimony got more damning, the column of ash on Darrow's cigar got longer and longer and longer, and until the jury, which you could, people, and witnesses in court say you could see the jury nudging each other, going, "Look at that!" And Darrow would sit with the cigar perched over his chest with this huge, impossible column, Damoclean column of ash sitting there. No one's paying attention to what the witness is saying. Everyone is hypnotized by this. So, and other lawyers did see the similar things. There's a British lawyer called Sir Edward Marshall Hall, who famously turned down representation for Dr. Crippen, but did a few other very high-profile cases. But Marshall Hall would come into court with 3 clerks behind him, and one clerk carried these packages of brand new silk handkerchiefs. The other clerk had 2 jugs of water, and another clerk had a mysterious paisley patterned bag. And if the case against Marshall Hall's client got bad, he started to blow his nose on the handkerchiefs. If it got worse, he would spill the water all over the table, and if it got really bad, he would open the bag really slowly, and he produced this rubber cushion. And it was sort of well known around the bar that Marshall Hall suffered terribly with hemorrhoids. So he would sit and just blow up this cushion very slowly, and of course the jury's mesmerised by this sort of pantomime. They're not paying attention to what's in court at all. So those kind of lawyers, and if you get someone who's doing that for the right reasons, that sort of thing, that's partially the sort of inspiration for Eddie. But Eddie's not really it's not a comic matter. These are very hard-hitting, exciting, entertaining thrillers.
And is the focus, I mean, you talk about the advocacy in the courtroom and then the procedural. In the Eddie Flynn novels, how much is the case a factor, or how much is it about the law?
Very little. There's lots of courtroom scenes in it, but I'm mostly focused on what happens within that scene, and within that witness, and how you could have a witness who's telling the truth, but Eddie might totally destroy them. So, for example, in the first book, The Defence, what happens is Eddie has quit the law, and his daughter is kidnapped by the head of the Russian mob in New York. They've been watching Eddie for some time, and they know he knows all the security guards and all the security staff in court. They want Eddie to smuggle a bomb into the courthouse, because the head of the Russian mafia is on trial for murder. They want Eddie to plant this bomb in the courtroom and kill the prosecution's star witness, or they're going to kill his daughter. That is the premise for The Defence. So it's a high concept, roller coaster thriller. Most legal thrillers, it starts off as a crime, there's an investigation, then there's a trial at the end. All the Eddie Flynn novels take place over sort of 48, 72 hours. It's a real action-packed thing. So Eddie then decides, well, look, you don't need me to plant this bomb. I'm going to win this case. And his client's guilty, but you're really rooting for Eddie. You're behind him. You want him to succeed and get this guy off, because he's doing it, again, for the right reasons.
That's brilliant.
To help his own daughter.
That's gripping. That's great, Steve. What a great... have you come up with a succinct tagline for this?
For The Defence? No. I see, this is part of the reason why I'm not self-published. I can't do any of that.
I'm just thinking... It's not a million miles away from Adam Croft's book, he's had tremendous success with, and partly down to his tagline is, "Would you kill your wife to save your daughter?"
Yes.
I mean, it's a different scenario, but that sort of tagline that sells that high concept is so important in I can see it on the film poster.
Yeah, it is. Those are all really important, but I'm terrible at all of that. I can't write a synopsis. I can't write a blurb. I can write the book, and that's about all I can do. So I'm one of those guys who needs a team of people behind me, because I wouldn't be able to do any of that myself. I just couldn't do it. But I do listen to the show every week, and I'm in awe of the authors that you have on, and particularly Mr. Dawson, and what you're able to do, because it's fascinating and it's brilliant, very exciting.
So your traditional deal, how and when did that come about?
Okay. Well, I started writing quite late. I started writing when I was about 18 or 19. I wrote screenplays. And I wrote 3 or 4 screenplays, didn't get any of them sold. Managed to get an agent, but didn't get any of them sold. So I gave up. I said, look, this is just far too hard. And I was in university then, so I trundled on, forgot about writing, didn't go back to writing at all. And then about 2011, my mum passed away quite suddenly. And she was the only person who ever encouraged me to write. And it was her that gave me the sort of love of reading, particularly thrillers. So I sort of thought to myself, life's too short. I should go back and have a go. So I was quite determined to do this for once, because I always thought, I could go back to writing, but I never had. So after a sort of 15, 16-year break, I went back to it, and I wrote The Defence in 6 months, and started editing it and working at it and reworking it. And then I thought, I'm going to try and get an agent. And it looked at self-publishing. And it was so intimidating, because it's a wonder that we're able to do this, because I'm technically stupid when it comes to all of this stuff. I just can't do it at all. So I thought, I'm going to have to try and do that. So I sent off the manuscript to lots of agencies, and then I got all the rejections. So I got maybe 40 or 50 rejections from literary agents. And I had got a couple of nibbles. A couple of agents in New York said, "Oh, I like this," and send me the whole manuscript. And then they come back and said, "I really vacillated about whether to take you on or not, but I've decided not to." So there was a small firm, a small literary agency in London. I tried some of the bigger agencies in New York and not gotten anywhere. I tried some of the agents then in the UK, but only small agencies. And there was one small agency that came back and said, "I love the opening of this book. I want to see the whole manuscript." So I thought, okay, that's good. That's very encouraging. But the agent said, "It's actually my partner who deals with the thrillers, so I'll have to wait and see what he says, but I love it." So I thought, I've been in this boat before and got close and got rejected. Why don't I try some of the bigger agencies? So I sent off the opening 3 chapters to a few of the bigger agencies. And I remember it well. It was a Monday night. I got an email back from the small agency, who were initially very keen. And the email from the agent was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. He said, "This book will never be published. Scrap the whole thing and write something else." And I was devastated. And then on the Wednesday, I got emails, offers of representation from 2 of the big agencies in the UK. And I went with AM Heath in London. And I worked on the manuscript with my agent, Ewan Thornycroft, for about 3 months. This was around April 2013, I think. And he sent it off then to publishers. It was around the time of the Frankfurt Book Fair in October, maybe around September time, I think. And he said, "Look, I've sent off the manuscript. It'll probably be a month or so before we hear anything. So don't be worrying, just forget about it." So I thought, okay, because I am a worrier, I do worry about things and I get anxious and impatient. So a week later, he emailed me and says, "Okay, so there are 5 publishers bidding on your book in the UK.
Wow.
There are 7 in Germany. There's this many in this country and this many." So it was just magical. And I didn't care. All I wanted was the book to be published. I wanted to see the book in my hand. And if it was on a shelf in a bookshop, that was a bonus. That was all I wanted. I had no aspirations for anything else, really. So that was just incredible. And the book sold in lots of different countries, lots translated, lots of different languages, which is great because you see all the different covers coming in, and it's brilliant to see what covers are like in different countries and what sells books in different countries and not the UK or the US. So yeah, it's been amazing. It's been a sort of total dream come true.
What a great story. And tell me, did the book change very much in those 3 months you worked on it with the agent?
Mostly it was changing the ending and tightening it up a little bit and, covering up plot holes and things. But most of it is exactly as it was, really.
So there was absolutely no justification for that brutal treatment?
No, in particular, the first chapter as it's published, in however many languages it's published in now, is exactly the chapter that went off to those agents.
So, I mean, it's an interesting story because it's, on the one hand, it's an affirmation of good work will find a way, and it's also a damning indictment on an aspect of the old gatekeeping system, which does rely on this rather subjective. And who's to judge? That's the beauty of self-publishing, is that it's the reader ultimately who will judge whether they buy the book or not, and it does not matter what somebody sitting in an office in London, Dublin, or New York thinks.
Exactly. I mean, that's a fantastic thing about it. But I mean, getting a no from a literary agent is only, it's a personal thing. It's that person on that day saying, "You know what, that's not for me." It's not, a damning indictment of the work, although there were a few damning indictments of the work. But that's fine. Again, you get that from readers. But again, that is the brilliant thing about self-publishing, is you can let the readers decide. But, on the other hand, what I have the benefit of, and what I think I need, is a big team behind me, both to publish the books, but mainly for the editorial work. There's a huge amount of editorial work goes into it. And from what the self-published authors that I know, they do a lot, and a huge amount of work editorially. They will go through a couple of rounds of edits. They will go through copy edits and proofs and all of that. So I don't think there's much difference these days. And the successful published authors that I know, they're doing the same work that I'm doing. But and they care about the work. They want a book that they can be proud of, because they have realised the big thing. As I know, your podcast is a lot about marketing and selling and how to sell your book, which is, and you're trying to figure it out. And, traditional publishing still trying to figure it out. Nobody really knows.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, what's going to happen with a book. No one knows.
And whatever's working now will be different in 5 years' time anyway.
Exactly, yes. And it's probably the same with self-publishing. It's getting that name out there. It's all about discoverability and getting your book in front of someone so they'll read it. But the best thing you can do to sell your book is to write a great book. Because that's word of mouth, either digital word of mouth or, a real word of mouth, going into the office and saying, "Oh, I read this book last night. It's fantastic. You have to read this book." That's what you want. That's what happened with Girl on the Train. That's what happened with Gone Girl. When Gone Girl was published, it was published first in trade paperback in the UK, and it completely tanked. I know several retailers that, didn't want to take the paperback because they couldn't sell the trade paperback of that book. And then this sort of, cultural zeitgeist, it captured something and people were talking about it. So the people were going into these stores and saying, "I want this book." And whatever little copies they had were selling out and were buying more. And that book built up its own head of steam. There wasn't a huge publishing push. There was no publishing push behind that book. No marketing thrown at it. It came out and it took off after a while. And that just can happen sometimes with books. But again, it's because it's a great book.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the marketing push behind your book now, I mean, are you how involved are you? Aware are you of the campaigns and what goes on?
Well, I'd be very aware of it. So I have regular meetings with the publisher. I get emails. I get sent what the campaign is. So there's a really good ebook campaign going on at the moment, and there will be different campaigns depending on what book is out. I'm publishing the third one on the 18th of May, just in a couple of days' time. It comes out. So there's different campaigns for each book, depending on where they are and how they want to push it. So most of the campaigns go into paperbacks, because that's where the publisher makes their money and they can sell that volume. So with ebooks, there's Facebook advertising. There was a BookBub, which was very, very successful. And there's little things like adjusting metadata. I did not know how important that was. I couldn't even tell you really what it is, to be honest. Now I know it's it's a sort of a key what the book is kind of thing on a very basic level. I could be totally wrong about that, but again, this is why I need people to do this for me, because I haven't a clue. So all of that, even making slight tweaks to that, can send a book skyrocketing. It's little tweaks like that have made The Defense a bestseller. So I'm totally indebted to them, but I do see all the campaigns. So I'll see there will be a marketing campaign. There will also be a publicity campaign, which is separate. So I'll be doing radio interviews. My publicity manager will be sending me out to literary festivals, and we're pitching me for literary festivals, which I can talk about, which is a great thing to do. And radio, paper, newspaper, that sort of stuff like that, and sending it out to the right people who will review it online. So all the big crime fiction websites, like Crime Fiction Lover, and even other publishers will be recommending my books because they get to see it and they like it. So it's a great joined up approach, and they're complementing one another, and they're working on different books. So I am quite involved in it. I know some authors who really don't know what's happening. But I think more and more these days, publishers, and certainly my publisher, Orion, are very keen to get me involved with what's happening, and even listen to my crazy ideas about doing things from time to time. So it's all good.
And in terms of the books, Steve, so obviously you're writing about something you love, something you're interested in, which is kind of a good starting point for anyone. And then how much work do you do, or how much regard do you pay to keeping in genre and thinking about something that's going to be identifiable to its potential readers as a genre book?
None whatsoever.
That's what I wondered.
None. Because once you do that, you're in trouble. I heard there was a guy on your show who was talking about, well, if you're going to write a book, you need to do your market research. Who is your audience? and all of that. And I think once you start that, my view is, and due respect to this gentleman, and he created a product and all for that. I think that's great. But for me, I would never touch it in a million years. Why I write a book is I get a crazy idea in my head, normally a sort of a what-if idea. So my books are, for the Eddie Flynn, the first Eddie Flynn story was, what if there was a lawyer who was doing a murder trial and he had a bomb strapped to his back and his client had his finger on the detonator? That was the idea for the defense. And I thought, okay, that's pretty bad. How can I make that worse? And that was the idea for that book. With the plea, it was different. With the liar, it was different. For the one I've just finished, it's, what if Eddie's involved in a celebrity murder trial and there's a serial killer, but the serial killer isn't on trial. The serial killer's sitting on the jury. Those sort of things, I'll get an idea about that and I'll go, okay, that's a book. And I go and write it. I'm trying to tell a great story, what I think is a great story, a story that I want to read. I have no regard for what anyone else wants to read. So if anyone else does want to read it, I count myself as blessed. Well, that's great that you like that. But I am writing it because I think it's a good story. And if the audience is there, fantastic. That's a bonus. That's luck.
And you're a happy coincidence of being interested and passionate about an area that people are interested in. I mean, I'm thinking back at the beginning of the interview and you said that nobody's that interested in the kind of dry procedurals, but I don't know if that's true as such, because I can think of quite a lot of books that are. I mean, do you remember the old Crown Court series, which used to be on BBC or ITV? I mean, every single episode of that long-running series was set entirely in the middle of a court case and was partly about procedure. It is, and I used to be a journalist. I used to sit in magistrates' courts and Crown Courts, and unless you've done that, you have no idea of the raw theatre in a Crown Court case. That moment a jury comes back and someone's life, to use the cliche, someone's life is about to change. A person's going to go to prison for 17, 18 years or possibly life. A family are going to get exonerated, or a killer's going to walk free. And I've been there in all three of those circumstances. It's the most dramatic, gripping thing. And it doesn't surprise me at all that it is a successful content for books and drama. Oh, yes. Well, I mean, when I talk about procedure, I don't mean that. I would classify that as action. That's courtroom action. And you're absolutely right. There is nothing like that drama when you capture it. But when I'm talking about procedurals, you would get people say, I need to make an application and I would need to make a motion for this and no objection and all of this business. And there's a legal argument, if you like, because that stuff's boring. Even lawyers find that stuff boring. But you can't write a realistic courtroom procedural. You seem as though you can't write a realistic police procedural. Because most policemen, be it in America or in the UK, spend a lot of their time sitting at their desks working. That's where a murder case is solved, at the desk. They're not out interviewing witnesses or, hitting people or doing, involved in car chases. That's not police work. So there is a willing suspension of disbelief in all of it. Yeah, the thing is, I'm more interested in the reader turning the pages than they am. I do give them a lot of information, but it has to be something interesting. Yeah, sorry for interrupting. I must say I can't watch Silent Witness because I've covered the real life thing, and the idea of a forensic pathologist getting that involved in the case and interfering in what's going on rather than examining the body and presenting evidence is ridiculous. But that's how that's how Silent Witness works. So at BBC. Well, you're right. Same with Judge John Deed. Do you remember Judge John Deed? Yes, I do. Yeah. He used to sleep with everybody. He was sleeping with the prosecutor, sleeping with witnesses, but I quite liked it. It was because fun, Yeah, we're referencing quite a lot of British crime series. I don't know how many of these have travelled elsewhere, but there you go. Now, the defence sounds like an absolutely bang slam Hollywood film to me. That sounds like a Denzel Washington. You must have had interest. Where are we with that? We have had a lot of interest. The thing is finding the right person. There was a couple of Hollywood directors have looked at it very seriously and talked to my film agent, and a couple of TV channels as well, and different producers. But it's trying to. I'm a bit worried about it. The only thing that I do regarding the business is I look at other authors that I really love, and I sort of find out what happened in their careers, where they went right and where they went wrong. And one of my favourite authors is Michael Connelly.
And I looked at his career, and at one stage early on in Michael's career, he sold the movie rights to Bosch, right? And to Paramount. And it was great. It gave him the money he needed to give up his journalism job so he could write full time, and he bought a house. But Bosch didn't happen. They didn't make that movie. They wrote a few scripts and then they shelved it. So he couldn't sell that property anywhere else. Bosch, I know we're like on the 21st Harry Bosch book now. So 20 odd years later, we're now seeing Bosch on the screen. That's because Michael bought the rights back from Paramount at great personal expense and then took it to Amazon to do it. So you have to be extremely careful. I have the same, Hollywood agent as Michael Connolly, so he knows all about it. So you have to be very, very careful about who you sell it to. And the thing is not, selling it for money, it's getting it made. As I'm sure Mark will tell you, because he's going through all this now. You want to put it somewhere in someone's hands who will make it. And there's very few directors that you can rely on to do that. Less and less so these days. Only one of them I can think of is Clint Eastwood. When he buys a book, that's his project and he'll make it,
Yeah, well, it takes us back to the Cal Moriarty interview we did and all these pitfalls, and that's certainly one of them. Going into, what do they call it, turnover or something, as an expression for when a film just begins and then gets held on hiatus, which can last decades, and it's turnaround, I think they call it. Turnaround, yeah, which is a horrible thing for the writer. As you say, you just sat there and they're not going to let the rights go because there's some feeling in the back of their brain that at some point it might get made. In reality, it's not going to be. But yeah, you're right to be cautious.
Yeah. You have to be cautious. So we haven't found the right people yet, and you never know, we might do. But I'd be more inclined to look towards TV these days, I think.
Yeah.
Because, and I think Mark's doing the same. But because it's all superhero stuff in the movies. They want that tempo superhero movie, and good thrillers aren't getting the sort of audience that they used to.
And we have had the rise of the Scandi long form. So any of those Killing Bridge Tunnel, which is the UK remake, any of those could have been a Hollywood film, but actually worked much better as a series, and potentially the Defence could, I guess. Yeah,
there's a lot of stories in the Eddie Flynn. There's 3 novels published now. There's another one coming next year, and there's a novella. So there's lots of material there, and you could. Ian Rankin's actually just got Rebus. He's going to get Rebus back on the screen. So, and they are going to do it properly now, because when they were last doing it, I think with Ken Stott as Rebus, it was one episode was one book. Whereas now it will be 3 or 4 hours or a week of programming for one book, because as a novel is more suited for adaptation through TV.
Yeah.
And the serial stuff, like you see on Netflix, you'll get something will be downloaded 8 episodes and you can go through it, and it feels like a proper book. There's got real depth to it, which you don't get from a movie.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the subject matter will ever go out. I mean, you've got a really interesting and exciting sort of action take on it, but the crime genre, and I'm reminded of, we're recording this interview today when a guy called Ian Brady has died in the UK, and he was a notorious child killer, absolutely notorious, horrible 1960s case. And there was a big feature on the radio this morning about a bit of a moral panic that happened at the point of his arrest and trial, because the trial was so disturbing, they tortured children to death and recorded it, that the newspapers went into a bit of a panic about what they should report, and they played some of the contemporaneous interviews about it, and it just made me think how far we've come, but how they were talking in a rather pretentious way about nobody wants to hear the sordid details of this, and the reality is the opposite, really. Actually, there's a fascination, a grim fascination that's drawn to this other side of life that hopefully, touch wood, will never impinge personally on our lives, but we can't turn our heads away from it.
That's right. I mean, I think that's what drives the genre to some extent, but whilst you have that, I mean, there are people who are fascinated by the grim details of it all. But most, I think, people like it. It's like going to the zoo and looking at a lion or looking at a tiger, and you think, if this cage wasn't here, I would be mincemeat. That's what you're doing when you're reading that sort of a crime novel. You get to vicariously experience that fear. And also you're trying to work out, why would someone do that? because it's just, and I think, in some ways this is perhaps some fascination for people with aspects of wars as well. Why do men do these things, these horrible things, and how can we understand that? But yeah, I accept there is some grim fascination with it. However, the big switch now in modern crime fiction is to make sure, and all the crime writers I know, and I certainly try to do it, is the victim is not a plot point. It's a real person. You try to make your victims in the book as real as possible, and so that you're not, exploiting them. And that's one of the themes. Perhaps some crime writers who are coming along with this think, oh yeah, I'll have all these victims in it, but they don't create that empathy with the reader, and it's simply a plot beat. And you see that sometimes in TV as well. Whereas modern crime fiction is very much about the reader gaining real empathy with the victims, because the victim is sometimes forgotten in all of these things. Like, how many serial killers can we name between us now? Probably at least a dozen. How many of those serial killers' victims could we name? Probably not as many, or very few. So, but I think that's very important, and there is a real ethical movement, shall we say, in the genre to make sure that nothing is gratuitous. I think nothing is gratuitous. Nothing is no one is typing with one hand, shall we say. I'll let everyone work that out for themselves.
And on that note, let's just talk about the writing process before this interview has rattled past, Steve. It's been absolutely compelling. Let's just talk about the writing process, because as a writer, and I know as our listeners as well, would like to know how each other does it. How do you approach your writing? Are you routine, disciplined, or just seat of your pants when you get going?
It's a desperate struggle, really. I have a very, very basic idea, and a very basic idea for an opening scene, and that's as much as I know when I start. I don't know the end, I don't know the middle, I have no idea. I write line by line, so I try and put in 2 or 3 hours a day. I start writing around sort of 10 o'clock at night, and I work until my head hits the keyboard, which might be 1 a.m., 2 a.m., or 15 minutes past 10. Just I try to get whatever I can done. So I don't have a word count. I just try to make progress. Sometimes that's a paragraph, sometimes it's a couple of chapters. It depends. Because I don't outline, there are various points in the book where I have to stop, because I don't know what's going to happen next. I was, for example, I was writing the last book. I had to stop because there was a knock at the door in this scene, and I didn't know who was on the other side of the door. So I went back and wrote another bit of the book and came back to this, and then I did know who was on the other side of the door. And then this character who was on the other side of the door had a box in their hand, and then I had to stop again because I didn't know what was going to be in the box. So when I say stop, I'll stop for a day and think about it, and then go back, and then around 20,000 words I stop and read over what I've got and redraft it a bit. And I will do that at around 60,000 words as well, 80,000 words, and then up to 100,000 words, or whatever the book is. A couple of my books are about 120,000. So I will stop at various points and go back and read over. Largely because I forgot characters' names, or what their colour of their eyes are, or something like that. And I'll say, oh God, I forgot about him. I'll have to put him in here somewhere else. So yeah, I do, and that seems to work for me. I wouldn't recommend it as a way of writing a book. It's a terrible way to do it, but it just seems to work. Whatever works, right? And how long do you write for at a time? Yeah, sometimes it is an hour. Sometimes it's a couple of hours. So I don't sleep much. I get to bed normally around midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm up at 6 because I have young kids. So, but I do it because I love it. I really enjoy doing it. I know there's writers who hate writing. I don't understand that. I do really enjoy making things up and having fun. And, if I want to know what we're going to find out, what's going to happen next in the story, I'm thinking our reader's going to want to know that. And it's the story driving me along. If I knew what happened in the whole story before I started, I probably wouldn't want to write it. It's not that fun for me, Well, it's working for you, and congratulations on your success so far, Steve. I'm going to pick up The Defence. It's on my list to read. Don't be too cautious with the film companies. I think it would be a fantastic
film come miniseries. So if you can get that deal done at some point, it's for me, it's a really, I mean, of all the pitches I hear, you know that some characters are going to lend themselves to a film, but that is a concept that I think will draw people in. Anyway, it's just my view. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight from across the water there in Belfast.
Not at all. Thank you very much. It's been fantastic. I love this show. I listen every week. It's great.
Oh, well, there you are. You're a part of it this time.
Brilliant. Thanks, James.
Love that interview with Steve. And I wasn't, some authors can be very eloquent about what they do and why they do it, and other authors find it more difficult to talk about things. That's probably why they're authors. Steve was definitely in the first camp, one of life's great enthusiasts, really fun and interesting guy, and traditionally published, but I think fascinated by what's going on in the world of indie publishing as well, and keeping half an eye out on that.
What camp am I in?
You're reticent, quiet, shy, someone who doesn't like talking about themselves. Actually, you're very good. You are reasonably, despite the publicity and coverage you get, you are reasonably modest when you speak. Certainly you present yourself as that anyway.
I try to be. Yeah, no, it's a fair point. I don't like to blow my own trumpet too much. And
you're not vain, because I shaved before this interview. Actually, I interviewed Chloe Esposito this morning.
That's why you shaved.
Yes, why I shaved. And I mentioned Chloe's book last week. That was a great interview and a name to watch. She's really going places, Chloe. First novel is published in the UK tomorrow, where we are now. So we're recording this on Tuesday of the week when you get it on the Friday. It's complicated. So her novel will be 2 days old by the time this podcast gets released on Friday, called Mad. She's coming up shortly. We've also got Felicia Yap, who came through the same stable, actually, the Faber Academy. And we're going to do, I think the summer is a good time to have author interviews. We will have some technical podcasts as well, but I think these author interviews are great. We all enjoy them. We all like hearing how other people got their start, how they got their deals, how they run their marketing if they're self-published, how they write, all those things, which all filters in. We all soak all that stuff up, don't we?
We do, yeah. It's good for. I mean, I love those kinds of interviews. It's always interesting to see how other people do the same thing that I do. So you can always learn different routines, different ways to increase your productivity and all that kind of stuff. And also, I mean, you mentioned Chloe. I mean, she's, without spoiling too much, she's got a great film deal coming up, and it's quite aspirational to look at that, given that I'm probably slightly behind her when it comes to that, but pushing forward in that direction too. So definitely looking forward to hearing that one. Yeah,
and one of the things she talks about in the interview is how she wrote with a film in mind, not because she was thinking commercially about selling the rights, but because that's how she thinks. She thinks in terms of the 2-hour film, which is quite a good way to write a book anyway.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, Mark, that's it. I'm not sure what we're doing next week. We've got a couple of interviews still in the bag, but we will be down in Salisbury your way shortly to cause havoc and upset you with untidiness. So you
yes.
said we were talking about people taking pictures of their workspaces, something you asked people to do of new 101 students. We had quite an interesting one, didn't we? A photograph popped up.
Oh God, yes, this was at 35,000 feet. Yeah, we had. I can't remember the name, and I probably wouldn't name him anyway in a very public forum like this. But pilot of a 737. Is it, James?
It was actually an A320.
A320. Nerd alert, everyone. Yeah. James loves airplanes. He was a pilot, and he was writing whilst he was flying, or at least whilst he was on the flight deck. But James tells me that it's perfectly safe for everyone, and there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah, you only really need to concentrate for the first minute and a half and the last minute and a half, and in the middle you need to keep yourself reasonably active and alert. That's what they say. It's absolutely true. Anyway, we're delighted. We have quite a few pilots, which is quite exciting for me. So we have an F-16 pilot, 2 F-16 pilots from the United States. We've got is that me or your end, the talking?
That's me.
There's noises off around you. Okay, we're going to wrap up any moment. But I was thinking, are the voices in my head? Have they come back? But it's at your end. Of course, we had that United Airlines Susan Grant, who flies 747s for United, which is very exciting for me. And they're very welcome to join my list at jamesblatch.com, because I'm always on the lookout for.
I see what you did there. Very smooth. I've taught you well.
You have people I can
Annoy.
Quiz. Yeah, annoy. Quiz. Okay, good. That's it. You and I need to go and find a dark room and lie down, and not together, obviously. And we look forward to speaking to you again next week. Have a great week writing, a great week publishing, and we'll speak to you in 7 days.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.